12 years of piano lessons.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I can play chords.
For like my senior concert, I played like the first movement of Beethoven's like Sonata Pathétique, like this like super big, complicated piano thing. And now the thought of me even being able to comprehend playing that, it feels like another person. It's
Yeah.
like a whole other, like, that person died and now this person exists. And I'm like, who was that person? Like that?
Yeah.
Who was 18-year-old Trapper? Like, that was crazy at that guy's.
Rhyme or free, it doesn't matter to me. It's my bad poetry. Good day, and welcome to My Bad Poetry, a podcast where we take a deep dive into our poems from youth, yesteryear, or even yesterday, always asking the question, why in the world did I write this? I'm Aaron.
And I'm Dave.
And today, if you had techno music producer and software startup CEO on your bingo card for guests on this show, today is your lucky day. Author of Childproof Sky, a new chapbook out at the end of 2023, Trapper Markelz, welcome to My Bad Poetry.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Dave. It's an honor to be on the show, and I look forward to sharing some bad poetry with you all.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we look forward to hearing it. But before that, is there anything in the intro that we may have missed?
No, I'm also an avid cyclist. Really enjoy getting out, riding my bike. A big angler, fisherman, pursuing bass fishing. Also a good lover of bourbon and anything of the spirit variety. Was born in Alaska and lived in Homer, Alaska for 18 years before going to New York for school, and lived in Chicago for 10 years and now live in Boston. And yeah, I'm excited to go through some poetry and talk about poetry. And it's one of my newer hobbies. I really just started writing in 2019 and then started submitting in 2020, and have really enjoyed sort of exploring the world and not only developing a writing practice, but also a submitting practice, and sort of exploring the journals that are out there and kind of learning about this whole universe of writers and readers, and then poetry content creators like yourself who are kind of exploring good poetry, bad poetry, and everything in between.
Yeah, we're exploring right along with you. Now, you have here your favorite poet is Jim Harrison.
Yeah, so Jim Harrison is a novelist and author. One of his famous books is Legends of the Fall, but he was a big poet writer as well, and is known for a number of different books. And actually, I kind of got into poetry through Jim Harrison. I'd always been aware of poetry and experienced poetry and sort of various channels like NPR and things like that. But in 2018, I saw a special about him that was on CBS Sunday Morning, I think, where they kind of interviewed him and his life and his writing and his poetry practice. And I just was really fascinated with his sort of salt of the earth, Montana, mountain kind of ideals. And as someone who was born in Alaska and experienced a lot of nature, just really connected to a lot of the ideas that he had in his poetry. And so it was one of the first times I really saw myself in a lot of the poetry. And so that just made me hungry to kind of explore and learn more. And you start reading one poetry book, it leads to the next, it leads to the next. Next thing you know, your shelf is full with like 60 poetry books. And you're like, where did all these come from?
Right.
It's just so easy to buy a poetry book and be like, oh yeah, I'd read something, in Rattle or in Poetry Magazine. And I want to read more from that author. Let me put that in my wish list. And next thing you know, like your wish list is full of poetry. And then all you get for Christmas and your birthday when people look at your wish list is poetry books. And so now I'm just like, swimming in poetry books.
Yep. Yeah, I know exactly how that feels. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, to start us swimming in the realm of bad poetry, Dave, you've had several weeks before we've recorded. What bad poetry do you have for us today?
Well, I've been growing as a poet, and I thought I would explore some history for myself. So this is a poem called Betrayal. I thought you were cool. I trusted you to stay that way. Your lies are just another issue in all the games you play. You're slipping through the cracks, sinking further down and still low. Why must you do this to me, you awful, annoying pillow?
Deep
in the cracks.
I know. I just... You got to write what you know, and all I know is sleeping. So
very authentic voice.
Mm-hmm.
My first question is this a couch pillow, bed pillow? Lay the scene for us, Dave.
This is a bed pillow.
Okay.
Our mattress keeps slipping, and then the pillow falls in, and my world is collapsing around me. This is the first worldiest of first world problems.
So what genre were you exploring there? As far as you said you were stretching yourself.
Oh no, just exploring history. Just trying to understand like the classic struggle of man versus pillow.
Yeah, I mean, it has like a full historical arc to it, right? We didn't always sleep with pillows. So
There you go.
it used to be just our arms, and now we've sort of, like Prometheus handing us fire, we've been given the pillow, and to take it away is painful. It's trauma. And so I can feel you wrestling with not only the trauma of your pillow loss,
Mm-hmm.
but the struggle of an ever slipping mattress and the gap that it's opening not only in your life, but maybe your marriage too. Like there's something
There you go.
that is widening.
Well, it appears our time is up. You can see the receptionist on the way out. This was a great therapy session.
Yeah. Wow. That was something. And Trapper, from your deep analysis of this pillow poem, I think we have a lot to look forward to. We were just, I don't know if you noticed, but I had like a tapping above me. That's my child in the room above. Dave has two children. I think one was screaming for a little bit in the background there.
Yep.
So I see that you have given us a poem that you describe as a poem about making babies that went weird.
Yeah.
So with that, I would love if you could start us out with "Hello, Babies."
Yeah, I have 4 kids. My oldest is in college. I have a junior in high school, 2 junior high kids, 3 girls and a boy. And yeah, I just was exploring a poem about kind of the absurdity of just being a parent from the perspective of making babies. And so yeah, this poem is what it is.
Love it.
Just see where this goes.
Yeah.
So yeah, this poem's called "Hello, Babies." Hello, newborn. Welcome to the beginning. It took a bunch of sex to get you here. When you are done crying, please take your place in the long line of salt formations. It is always the end days in these parts. Don't worry. Don't bother seething. Don't look up. It's a storm. It's a dragon. It's a rotten beach whale carcass festering on the border of your brain barrier. The candy will, from now on, be sugar-free and taken from you at all hours. We are running out of wool garments, and wool to make the garments, and flesh on which to grow the wool for garments. For now on, all garments will be made with diverse forms of human body hair. Give thanks to the church for this. Give thanks to your neighborhood progenitrix. Billions down, trillions to go, my little embryo.
So where's the weird part of that? I just festering whale carcass and lots of sex.
Yeah. Once I started going down the human hair route, I felt like it started to go a tad off the rails.
Well, that was only in the second to last stanza. So
Yeah.
you were solid before that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in here is like there's a lot of attempt to just sort of grapple with the craziness of deciding to bring children into this world. And
Yes.
then, there's also certain elements of the inevitability of it and the timelessness of it, right? The billions of people that have lived, the trillions more that will live in front of us. And then just like some of the ideas around scarcity of resources and both as a parent and sort of what that means as you add more children to your family, how things just get more and more expensive, more and more rare. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. And, this is never a poem that I've felt has ever gotten to a point where it's submittable. It uses a lot of exclamation points, which is also just, I guess, supposed to not be a thing that you do. So I've never had a chance to really go back and rework this enough. But yeah, I like it. It's a fun poem. It's tries to be a little bit funny. But yeah, it's Hello, Babies.
Hello, Babies. I agree. I think this is a fun poem.
Yeah.
My one piece of advice, I think it needs more exclamation points. I think
Double points even?
you have them going for the first 3 stanzas, we get a good smattering, but then there's a dearth. There's nothing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it kind of turns into a list poem about all the places you can grow wool and hair at the end.
I agree, more exclamation points, but also I see no semicolons. And you're just neglecting your duty to include all of the semicolons. Because again, Aaron and I know good poetry.
I will admit on the record that I just don't know how to use semicolons, so I don't use them.
Does anyone?
I am the opposite of you. I don't know how to use them, so I use them everywhere.
Yeah, I end up using a lot of M dashes.
I noticed that you have.
Yeah, it's something that I don't know. Again, another thing where this one probably has too many M dashes in it. When I write like casually to people, I use a lot of like ... What's that called?
Ellipses.
An ellipses. Yeah.
Yes.
I use a lot of ellipses because I like when I'm talking to people or texting because it feels informal. It feels conversational. So then when I write poetry, I can't use an ellipses because I've never even seen poetry with ellipses in it probably. But so I end up like using an M dash instead in a lot of places in that. But or using an enjambment in a way that like helps with the flow. But
the classier breaks.
Yes.
Classier breaks. Yeah.
Classier than the than the ellipses.
I do want to point out a little bit of alliteration that I loved. The rotten beach whale carcass festering on the border. Not the image I was expecting. But it stood out.
Yeah, I think that whole stanza is kind of talking about parenting, right? Like as a storm, as a dragon, as this giant, unmovable, stinking mass that like we don't know how to handle and move. And the whole border of your brain barrier is just like poking at this idea. I've always been fascinated with this concept that like when you smell stuff, it's attaching itself to your brain. Like those molecules are going in your nose and they're hooking themselves into the receptor. So like dead whale carcass is actually inside your body, connecting itself to your brain. Like the visual image of that to me is so powerful. So this whole brain barrier thing was where I was going with that.
I love that so much. Because like connecting it to the stanza before, it's always the end times in this part. Don't worry. Don't bother seething. Just like, it's chaos.
It's total
Whether
chaos.
it's trying to get to the library or like a kid having a meltdown over a toy, it's just like this is chaotic.
Yeah.
Nothing will ever make sense.
And I have to admit I read those 2 stanzas very differently. In that you're using the metaphor of storm and dragon and beach whale as like struggling with parenting a child and figuring out this chaotic world of inviting new life into your house and your family. But I actually read it as that, and maybe you were trying to do this because you mentioned it, but the struggle of like, should we bring new life into this world of chaos? Like I read that as, don't worry, child. Yes, there's all this destruction happening just outside of your comprehension. Like the world's on fire.
Yeah. And definitely in all of that, right, there's the idea that you're bringing people into a harsh world. That's what the candy stanza kind of gets at, right? The candy's going to be taken from you from now on. Oh, guess what? It's not even going to be good candy. It's going to be sugar-free candy, right? And it's going to be taken from you at all hours. Like, welcome to the world.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we get into the 2 stanzas that are entirely about wool and hair. So that was a good choice, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of those things where you start writing and you never know where it's going to lead, right? And sometimes when you write poetry, right, good poetry surprises the writer, and that's when you're kind of doing it right. Is that you're sort of finding the whole poem as it evolves, and that was one of those things where I started talking about the wool, and it went to wool, and then it goes to human hair, and I was like, I'm just gonna roll with this. I'm just gonna keep rolling.
I mean, it touches on that dystopian.
Yeah, and I have a fascination with like dystopian movies and all that. So yeah, there's definitely elements of that fascination in here.
Oh, this is a fun one. Dave, I saw your face at the long line of salt formations. You kind of made a face at that.
Well, yeah, like, because, so tears, and also semen.
Oh, no!
Is that what we're going for there?
I can say no. That was not on, but that's an amazing leap. That's an amazing leap that you made right there.
That's why I was like, I mean, it could just be a normal line about tears and crying, but also the lines previous were just about how much sex it took to get to this point. And so my brain...
That is amazing. I'm gonna hold that one in my pocket. That is an amazing leap. But no, it's a little more just straight up like crying and salt and a little bit of Sodom and Gomorrah kind of thing in there, right? Of just like, people as salt formations amongst the chaos of the world. Some of that was all tied up in there.
Do you want a fun biblical interpretation fact?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love those. Those are like, that's my jam.
Okay, yeah. So that whole Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt, some people believe that that's actually just a turn of phrase or a metaphor for her breaking down into sobs, crying. So it's not that literal.
That makes the stanza 100 times better.
Yeah,
right.
It does.
If I'd have known that biblical interpretation when I wrote it, I could take total credit for that. And I would be here in that interpretation. But no, that's amazing. That's another. I'm going to hold that in my pocket too, along with the semen.
I'm so sorry.
I don't know. I'm like, do I need to put a content warning in front of this episode? Because Dave is weird.
Hey.
Yeah. No, I see. Yeah, it parallels the first stanza. I get where you. Yep. I'm going to admit my ignorance here. Progenitrix. I know I've heard this word. I know I should know this word. I do not know this word.
Yeah, it's a female progenitor or like an ancestor. So it's another word for that. So it's this stanza. And again, I'm not so sure this is the best end of this poem, but at the end of the day, it sort of hints at like birth control, lack of birth control,
the church,
driving the world, just our ancestors and the people who came before us who, were the progeny of their work. Right. And so it leads into sort of this like purposeful, whimsical rhyme at the end, right? Billions down, trillions to go, my little embryo, sort of speaking directly to the baby. But that's kind of how it builds. So it's a hint at ancestors and ancestry and us being the progeny of, a prior set of people.
Yeah. I love that you pointed out the whimsical rhyme because I'm looking back other stanzas.
No, not on purpose.
Yeah. So you do kind of end with this fun embryo.
Yeah.
It kind of leads lullaby type.
That's what I was thinking. It's kind of sing-songy almost.
Yeah, it was I've purposely left it in there. When I go back and forth on the whimsy of it, but I think the poem deserves to be lighthearted, and it feels like a good ending. I haven't wrestled with it very much, but it's pretty much as I wrote it, like that stanza.
Nice.
I just love that you have shared this poem.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. It's one of the ones that, there's hundreds of poems on the cutting room floor that are just like, waiting to be resurrected or finished at some point. So this one's farther along than most.
Do you ever, what do your kids think about your poems? Do you ever read rough drafts to them, or do you ever share published work with them?
So I do share published work.
Okay.
Yeah, my kids are really supportive. And they see me read a lot. I read a lot of poetry. I read every morning. I don't always write every day, but I definitely read every day. And so they see the stack of books that's always on the side of the table, and the magazines, because I subscribe to a lot of journals too. And so they see me reading a lot. And sometimes, and I write on my phone. I keep a Google Doc on my phone that has like every poem that I'm always working on. And so sometimes they'll see me writing. or they'll know I'm writing and they'll go away. But in general, yeah, I share again, and I write about them too. Like I've had work published that's very clearly about my kids, not by name, but by thing. And I'm always happy to share that with them. And then they've come to I did a reading one time, and my whole family, all my kids came to it, which was
cool.
super exciting and also really weird for everyone else that was there because they're like, why are there kids here? Like there's never sixth graders at a poetry reading, and suddenly everyone's like editing their work and they're like, oh damn, are these poems okay for kids? And I'm like, don't worry guys, it's gonna be fine. And they had a blast. They had fun. It was fun to read in front of them. So yeah, they're super supportive.
Cool.
That's very cool.
You mentioned some of the poems. There's, oh gosh, I was gonna. Turning a Corner is one about age and growing older. That one was a beautiful poem. That
Ode to Being Frustrated with My Kids.
Yes, that one.
That was just recently published.
I love that one.
Yeah. Turning a Quarter is interesting because that poem got rejected for 3 years. Like I submitted that poem and I reworked it so many times, and I really liked that poem and I really wanted to see it published. So that one took a lot of work to get over the finish line. By contrast, Ode to Frustrated with My Kids I submitted it and it was accepted right away. I wrote that during a workshop with Patrick Roach, and yeah, it was great. It was fun, and that one got accepted quite quickly. So yeah, you never know. It's like some of them you beat on for years, and others just kind of work, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned how you read poetry every day, and in our opening conversation, you talked about how you fish quite frequently in the mornings. Did you like that segue, Dave?
Yeah, Aaron's really known for his segues in the same way that the company that makes segues is not known for segues. They just kind of suck.
Okay.
What?
Well,
sorry, Aaron.
Yeah,
you were saying?
So we're going to read a fishing poem now.
Yeah, fishing poems. I've never submitted a fishing poem. I write them. It's so weird because there's so many things that you can write poetry about that is like hyper specific to things that people don't understand or can't connect with, right? And so I think for poetry to be successful for publication, it has to be somewhat universal, unless it's thematic to like a themed issue or something. And maybe I talk a lot about like submission and that, but I do believe, and when I got into poetry, that like art is only completed when it can be consumed by an observer, like somebody who's consuming the art. Because if I'm just writing poetry and not sharing it, then it's journaling. It's like it's a thing that happens, right? But
like the esteemed art.
Yes, but now it's art because you're sharing it with the world, right? So
do not let him hear that. Yeah. Come on, he's already so full of himself.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe people don't agree, and I'm sure there's people that don't. But if you're just painting and not sharing it, then it's painting. But the moment you share it, now it's art. It's like, hey, I'm trying to convey something to a person, and so poetry, I feel like, is the same way. You can write poetry for sure for yourself. But in order for it to be art, you need to get it out into the world. So when I started writing poetry, I became fascinated with poetry, but I also became fascinated with the distribution of poetry as to like, well, how do people then experience it? Because that's what fundamentally makes it art, is I'm conveying something to somebody. So fishing poems are strange because you can really only convey fishing to other fishing people. It's hard to find universal themes in that and not have it feel trite. At least that's my experience. I'm sure there's some brilliant people, and I'm sure there's brilliant poems about fishing that I don't know about that are amazing, right? That convey universal themes. But I really struggle with that. So I've written a handful of fishing poems, this being one of them, and I've never submitted them. And I don't really yet know where to submit them. But I'll share this one with you and we can talk about it and go from there. So this poem is called Slaying It. Bobby Napoli makes his money selling broken dreams to flatlanders. He told us to skip the lobster pound. Nothing but people happens in that place. We drove the tree-lined roads to a pink and quiet seafood shack with empty picnic tables and a large lot on a hill above a busy highway. Bobby Napoli told us to ask for a lobster roll, those that recline in the fridge, pre-made, bulging with mayo, served with a British accent. Bobby Napoli told us which lures to use, that he was out of live shiners, but suggested bags of brined ones, their eyes blank as bullet holes hung by a single staple beneath broken fishing reels. Bobby Napoli shared his secrets, rock walls, plastic rats, American Sign Language, how to find the hits that keep us rapacious and waiting. Bobby Napoli was happy to take our money in the end. When you drive by at night, his lights are always on, but the shop sits empty, ravaged by another season of warm water promises and fluorescent crusade.
So what's a fish? I say I go fishing. I don't know what a fish is. No, I actually kind of love this because I started off thinking Bobby Napoli. Is that like a guy from? I thought he was one of the guys from a fishing show that I used to watch, and I'm like, no, that's not correct. Who is this Bobby Napoli?
Yeah. So Bobby Napoli is kind of a made up person. Mm-hmm. He's based on a guy that I know in Maine who runs a tackle shop. And I think the first part of this poem that I dislike and I struggle with in other poem writing is that it uses we, because the story is about an experience that you have with friends. So this is about like being with friends, fishing with friends, but the we isn't super apparent to others. Like the first question might always be like, well, who is the we? Like we drove the tree-lined streets, right? Like he told us which lures to use. So I haven't reworked it to try and make it singular versus a we thing. But I often have got critiques in the past that like using we in this way is not clear to the reader as to who you're talking about. So sometimes it can break the poem a bit to do it this way. So I've not reworked it in that manner. But that's one thing that's on my mind as far as like where this would need to go. But yeah, he's an archetype of someone who owns a tackle shop and someone who has opinions and somebody who's happy to just sell you dreams and take your money and and we're like a bunch of tourists, right, who come for the summer and ask him all these questions and pepper him with all the stuff. And so definitely a poem of an experience, and one that sort of gets at fishing, but maybe from more of a perpendicular angle.
I do love that because like anglers are known for their truth telling, and in my small town here, there is a sports fisherman club, and it's hilarious because they have like a clubhouse that you go into, and they've got a couple of fish on the wall, none of which are worthy of being mounted on a wall. But they're like, we're a sports fisherman club. We have to have something.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can dream you're going to catch like, a 40-pound catfish, but we've got a 2-pounder right here. And we just, I'm going to tell you that you will get something good. And you got to use the fake crawdads. The real crawdads not going to work. You got to use fake ones. Rub a little peanut butter on. Perfect.
Yeah. No, totally. Everybody has their superstitions and their tricks and their things that work for them but don't work for anybody else. And yeah, you find that in this poem. Like he has opinions about everything. He has opinions about where you should buy a lobster roll, and he has opinions about like what lures you should use, and he has opinions about his live bait selection, which he's out of live bait, but that's okay because that doesn't work anyway. Buy this other weird stuff that's like right. Happens to be the perishable stuff I have left, right?
That first line and then the selling tactics as well reminded me of a time where my father-in-law and I went out for a fly fishing adventure. We went fly fishing once in the Rockies, and so we went into the rookie naive mistake of just being like, hey, we've never done this before, and you could just see like the dollar signs like appear on it. And he was just like, oh, you're gonna need this for sure, and this and this, and it was like just, I mean, we were the tourists just being sold so many broken dreams.
Yeah, can you imagine going into a car dealership and being like, I need a car, I don't know what I need, I don't even know what cars are. Like, yeah. Oh, I got a car for you.
It has all these features that are
Yeah.
essential.
You totally need all these features for sure.
Yep, that was us. So that's what I heard in this poem. Like, I've met my Bobby Napoli. It's just,
Well, there's your universality then.
I guess,
If you're looking
yeah.
to turn a fishing poem into something not a fishing poem.
Yeah.
It's being upsold as a naive tourist. Yeah, there's the we there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that, right? It's sort of like making the trunk of the poem much more about that aspect of fish out of water, being taken advantage of, but also being known that you're taking advantage of and kind of being okay with that, right? Because you're just trying to experience a thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I grew up in a small town in Alaska that was a very big tourist town that was also very big on halibut fishing and charter fishing and taking people charter fishing. And I grew up, my dad owned a engine and boat repair business, and I grew up helping him fix boat engines and all that. And, you know, and definitely you could see like these are folks that like have, this is their dream, like to go out to catch a halibut. And they don't really care what it's going to take to do it, right? Like they just want to do it. Like that's why they're here. And so there's an element of desperation there of just like, I will do whatever you tell me to do because I don't care. I just want to catch this fish. And so I think there's a certain element of that in a lot of these experiences that you might go on, right? Like I want to climb this mountain. I want to see a whale. I want to catch a fish. Like you have these dreams in your mind, and there's all these people that need to help you achieve these dreams. And yet they're all like selfishly motivated because tourists come and go, like, but they're going to be here year after year and they got to make their money. So yeah, there's definitely some of that in here. Just needs to probably be worked a little harder to make those ideas clearer and come through.
Looking at the style, you have a lot of 4-line stanzas in there.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. I try to make my poems look like poems, I guess. Like I'm very obsessed. Like I don't do a lot of like crazy enjambment and spacing of words all over the page, right? I really love that moment when I write my poems, I write them all on a single, like I just write them all as single lines. Like you write the poem as like a paragraph, almost like a prose poem. So I write it as just a paragraph, and then I rework it as a paragraph a little bit, and then I put it into, like I enjam it into lines, and then I start thinking about the stanzas. And I do that pretty much with every poem. So, and it's also very rare that I don't have stanzas. I don't know why. I just tend to not like it when they're all like not when they're lined up. And then you also miss out on opportunities to bridge the stanzas in some ways. I don't actually do that in this poem. And that's an area where it's probably a little underdrafted, because when I was splitting up the lines, I ended up saying, actually, I'm just going to make these more subject-oriented stanzas instead of trying to hold them to any specific structure, because I was repeating the name. So because it's like Bobby Napoli told us, he shared, he was happy. So I started to become much more interested in what Bobby Napoli was saying in each stanza versus holding firm to some sort of structure. Now, the second stanza doesn't mention his name, which I've struggled with a little bit there, because it's almost like the first two stanzas are the same topic. It's all about us going in search of this lobster roll, which it was a thing that happened. Like this guy was like, hey, what are you guys doing today after fishing? And we're like, oh, we're going to go get a lobster roll at the Lobster Pound. It's a place in Maine. And he's like, oh, don't go there. He's like, it's too busy. Like, it's too expensive. It's not nearly as good as this other place. Like, let me tell you where the other place is. So like, we go to this other place, and it was not good. It was not good. So I was like, man, Bobby Napoli coming in with the weird suggestion.
Yeah.
So that, so the start of the poem was sort of that, and I haven't really reworked that. But the stanzas are a little bit haphazard in that way. Probably needs more work.
I will say, I think that is my favorite line of the whole poem. The nothing but people happens in this place. Yeah. I think that's really, it's a very sweet way of putting it. And then to go to the other place and be like, well, this is trash. Like this is mostly mayo. So yeah, nothing but mayo happens in this place.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do like that line as well. And that's why I think a big reason why this poem has stayed at the top of the drafts folder, and I've really wanted it to work,
Yeah.
uh, is I do like that line, and I do like the general bones of this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just never made it to the submission pile. It's never made it to a place where I feel comfortable with it being out there yet.
Yeah. Okay, I have to ask. We haven't talked a lot about titles recently. That used our guests over, but you titled this "Slaying It."
Yeah, yeah.
Why?
Because slaying is a term in fishing. So like if you're going to go out and fish, you can say, are you going to go out and slay? And it's like, yeah, we're going to go slay it. We're going to slay today. And
Slaying the crappies. Oh yeah.
yeah. And then amongst our friends, actually, we use this all the time. Like we talk about it like, oh, did you slay today? Like, did you go out and slay it? Like, and then you're the correct response if you caught a fish is, oh yeah, sleigh bells rang. Yeah, sleigh bells are ringing.
I love that so much. I'm stealing it.
Yeah,
That's so
and a
good.
lot of times when you hook into a fish, right, someone will shout like sleigh bells, sleigh bells. Like
Wow.
that's like it's a little behind the scenes like term of endearment that my friends and I use for fishing is slaying it. So we were out slaying it, and we met Bobby Napoli, and he sold us some stuff, and we ate some lobster rolls, and like it was a good day.
Okay, Dave, do you know
Mhm.
is slaying it like think something that they say in rural Minnesota?
It is. I
Really?
thought that was hilarious because I always took it in the direction of slay.
Yeah, I thought it was like
Yeah.
Like
the
that's
like
my
the,
direction of like joking around with it is did you slay? Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might come from that. Like
I
I
don't
think
think so.
I think
It's-
I think I don't think fishing terminology and drag culture overlap a ton.
I don't know.
But
We might be surprised.
it may
Oh,
be.
that's true.
But
That's true.
it is fascinating that these two terms, or that the same term has grown out of two what seem like very distinct cultures. Because I'll be honest, I have never heard slaying it outside of kind of the drag culture that has now been adopted by Gen Z slang.
Well, Aaron, sashay away.
I know, I know, but so that's why this title made no sense to me at all. It's just like, but now it does.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing that we say. I mean, I can't I've known that term for so long when it comes to fishing that I don't even know where it came from or where it arrived. It's just something that has always been said, and so we've adopted it quite deeply amongst my friends, and we use it all, like probably not a week goes by that somebody doesn't text somebody about slaying it or having slayed it or going to slay it or sleigh bells ringing.
That's
I
incredible.
even think I think my brother has a crappie slayer. It's
Yeah.
a small fishing rod.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like names of fishing rods that are like yeah, so having a sleigh stick, right,
Yeah.
is what a slang for a fishing term. So that's yeah, it's all wrapped up in there for sure. Yeah, I totally forgot about sleigh stick. Like that's some people
Yeah.
will call their fishing poles their sleigh stick.
Well, we're coming up here towards the end, and I did not.
It's
slay.
the end times around here, Aaron.
It's the end times. It's always the end times around here, Dave. So before we let you go, we here at my bad poetry. Blah, blah, blah. We here at my bad. Oh my gosh.
We here at My Bad Poetry like to end each week with the words of a true poet. So would you like to grace us with one of your wonderful poems?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Happy to read something. There's always a lot, of stuff that's in progress. This is a poem that I've been working on. I've submitted it to quite a few places. It's been rejected. It's gotten feedback. I've reworked it. I've resubmitted it, and I quite enjoy it because it's about sort of the town I live in. And yeah, I'll give it a read here, and you can all see what you think. This poem is called A Reading from Isaiah. We only recently got a pub up the street, a possible act of divine intervention. Being one of 8 dry towns until 1979, the council still hoards liquor licenses. Now we have a home for wakes, first communions, basketball banquets, and graduation parties. Grab a solitary beer after you close up the car lot. Stumble in after running out of rigid metal conduit. I met him there, and through bites of a Swiss cheeseburger, we talked about Trinidad and Tobago, Olympic medals, and razor blades, the surface tension of skin, how you can find the face of God in a sudden life-saving phone call. We talked about infant CPR, the smell of blueberry muffins in the morning, the face of Apostle Paul, belief in the ancient Greeks, the collateral damage of major house parties. It was a real treat turning water into wine, just 2 people talking together. And in the bustle of a life celebration, we made a pact before imaginary gods to return and give in to all the things our appetite might crave and live the days until our mourning shall be ended.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Like that's the perfect expression of like that what's it called, the third place, the third location. You have home, you have work, and then you need a third location where you can just be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a poem about place. I think the guts of the poem are really focusing on the kinds of conversations that you have with strangers, the kind of like real, meaningful, deep stuff that you can really only have with a stranger, because all of those stories you tell them for the first time, and you're really learning about each other, and so you find the barriers in those first conversations to be low, and you cover things that you can't possibly imagine. And so in the middle, it's a bit of a list poem of like what all of those conversations were. This was an actual experience I had meeting a person who was really only a general acquaintance, for dinner. And just this free ranging and crazy conversations that we went on across all these different places about how you learn about somebody, and just sort of the mystery and the magic of those kinds of conversations. And then it ends, with some words that are taken from the book of Isaiah. And the conversation I had with the person was one that just covered everything from childhood to adulthood to parenthood to religion to politics to to kind of everything. So I tried to capture that in this poem.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
thanks. Yeah, so I hope to find a home for it, and I'll let you guys know. If this is the first time I've ever read it anywhere, but it's still trying to find a place. So if I ever find a place for it, I'll let you guys know.
This has been my bad poetry.
Now go write some of your own bad poetry.
So for our end tag, I will say this has been Dave, I'm always going to offer it.
No, you're good.
Okay. I mean, you earned your keep this time. You took the wrap up word.
I actually did a thing.
You did a great job, Dave. Don't let Aaron tell you otherwise. Don't tell him how to.
He will.
Yeah, Trapper, when you leave, I just give him all these horrible critiques and notes and like shape up.
He's such a bad friend. He's such a bad friend.
This is his cry for help. Rhyme free doesn't matter.